Fortnite's Battle Royale playlists have consistently hit all-time low numbers in 2025, and at face value, it doesn't really look that bad. There have been multiple times in the past year where player counts have been similar. But when you start to look at the ranked Battle Royale playlist, this is when it starts to become a real obvious issue. The April and May 2025 numbers are around half of the previous low, with the trend seeming to continue downwards. So, what went wrong? When Epic Games announced ranked Battle Royale in May of 2023, the Fortnite community was actually incredibly excited, especially this guy, Jesus. Now, if I was to ask you what you think the main experience you want in a ranked mode would actually be, I think your answer would be something like this. You probably would want a skillful and rewarding loot pool, because if you're going to commit 20 to 25 minutes of your life to a match, you'd probably want the deaths to feel not that cheap and unavoidable. I think it's fair to say that you want to die skillfully in a ranked mode. You probably want good match pacing. So if you're 5 minutes into the game and there's only 20 people left, that means that the rest of the match might be pretty slow and boring. Now, tournament matches are slow, but there's a large payoff at the end where the end game is really good. And there's a lot of tension because dying means that you're going to lose points. But if you're in a ranked game where you're doing nothing for 15 minutes and then there's no end game, that's not the most exciting match to play. You'd probably also want reasonable matchmaking. I imagine that you'd probably be more willing to commit more time searching for a match if that match is actually going to be a good match. There are often 10 minutes between each game for scrims. I'm sure that's a little boring, but people do it because they know that the scrim match they're going to get into is a high quality game. However, with ranked Battle Royale, if you wait 10 minutes for a game, you're going to get into a pretty low quality match. So if you're playing against players of a similar skill level, with weapons you like, with well-paced action, then I'm sure you'd be happy to wait a little bit longer for the match. But if the match isn't going to be great quality, I'm sure you'd want matchmaking to be a little bit faster. And finally, you probably want a progression system that actually makes people try. If people care about ranking up and not ranking down, they're much more likely to try harder in the match. And if they're trying harder, the games become higher quality because there's actually a risk of dying. Unfortunately, Fortnite's rank mode misses the mark on quite literally all four of these aspects.
Now, if you played creative, you probably noticed your ping is higher than normal. Now, I'm usually flat 0 in creative, but frequently it just adds 20 to 30 ping randomly because the match connects to the wrong server. However, today's sponsor, Exit Lag, can help fix that. As you can see, when I turned it on, it went all the way down to 0, which is what it should be. Exit Lag is also phenomenal if you're playing on a region that's far away. Usually playing a tournament on the Brazil region from London on 190 ping. But with Exit Lag, that reduces by 60 ping to 130 in the click of a single button. Exit Lag only takes a few clicks to download, and they actually have a 3-day free trial, so you can test to see if it'll help improve your connection not just to Fortnite, but to over 2,000 games. They can also help increase your FPS with the FPS boost options, meaning you don't have to use some dodgy tweaker from Twitter. You can check out Exit Lag through the link in the description or by the QR code on screen, and thanks to them for sponsoring this video. As I was saying, Fortnite's rank mode, yeah, it's missing a lot.
Using the current Star Wars season as an example, the loot pool for ranked is actually pretty fun to fight with, but the TIE fighters and X-Wings basically just kill you instantly, which can be pretty frustrating. You can spend 5 minutes queuing into the game, 5 minutes off spawn, and then die to a vehicle with 1,250 HP. I don't know about you, but I don't really think that's that rewarding in a competitive mode, and there's a reason that things like these TIE fighters and other vehicles are taken out of actual tournaments. The matchmaking times are usually pretty reasonable if you're in a major region and play duos, but outside of that, the queue times can be extremely long, as it's just really difficult to fill a lobby of 100 people of a similar skill level. This is a much bigger issue in smaller regions where the player bases are just smaller, so finding a game without having to wait 20 minutes can be difficult at any time of the day, and then the game you find isn't exactly going to be a banger. The pacing of these matches is pretty strange too. Most players land at major POIs or hot drop, meaning if you don't land at one of these spots, you're probably going to have no action in the first 5 to 10 minutes of the game. Then, because there's so much movement with the vehicles, fights become this huge mess with a lot of players third-partying, which can obviously be a little bit frustrating. And then there's no big payoff in the end game because it doesn't have a lot of moving zones like high-level tournament matches do. But the biggest issue is really just with the ranked and progression system itself. The ranks go from bronze to unreal, and the reward for playing ranks just doesn't really exist. Now, for casual players and competitive players, you can unlock some cosmetics for every single rank that you go up, which is cool and a great addition that was added relatively recently. However, once you hit the Unreal rank or the Emperor rank in this current Star Wars season, there's not really much to play for. And that's specifically because you cannot D-rank out of this rank, which means there's no real incentive to play ranked. The result of this is that every single ranked battle royale game isn't really about winning, it just becomes about hot dropping and fighting. And once you hit this top rank, you're put into a global leaderboard where you now have a number associated with you, which does seem like a cool way to get high-level players to grind this, as they'll try to fight for the #1 rank on the leaderboard. But take a look at the leaderboard. At the time of recording, I was ranked 2061st. So how far away am I from #1? I mean, I can say I'm 2060 places away, but how far is that? None of these things are really in any way clear whatsoever by looking at this leaderboard, and that's especially true since there's not really a visible rating or elo system associated with that rank. And even if there was, I still wouldn't know how many elims, what kind of placement I would need to actually progress, or what I would need to do to not go down the rank as well. And even if I wanted to grind it, this leaderboard is not shown in game, it's only on the Epic Games website itself, which means that most people aren't even going to know this exists or even care about it. And thing is, this uncertainty isn't just a problem at the highest rank as well. It's unclear exactly what you need to do to rank up in the lower ranks as well. Do you fight? Do you try to put placement and win the game? And you can kind of figure this out by looking at the post-game lobby, seeing how many elims and placement you got and the bonuses and all of this kind of stuff, but it's just not clear. What do I need to do to rank up? And what do I need to do to not rank down? But imagine Unreal was just the top 500 players. There was a risk to dropping out of Unreal to the rank down below, and of course, if you want to climb up the leaderboards, you actually had to play it well. Currently, there's also only one rank, just Battle Royale. But if each team mode had its own rank, there would also be a reason to play these other modes, meaning lobbies would actually fill since there are people grinding for the #1 slot that aren't just going to play it in duos or aren't just going to play it in solos. But without this, it's honestly just a rather lackluster ranked experience. Ranked Battle Royale is just another playlist where you just go to fight other players, but it's arguably the least enjoyable playlist for this. All of this pushes good players away from Ranked Battle Royale, and where are they going to go? Well, if they want to practice a tournament-style match, they're going to play custom game scrims, and if they're going to practice fighting, they'll probably go into UEFN, or of course, Reload. And the numbers here don't lie. Initially, Ranked was slowly gaining popularity, going from 20% of the population to up to 30%. But then a huge percentage of players stopped being interested in this playlist. This massive dip down to 9.81% was due to the Wrecked season, which was basically the worst competitive season of all time, and I'm not really surprised the player numbers dropped so much. But with the release of Reload Ranked in September of 2024, the percentage of players playing a ranked mode jumped to 36.63%, and it went even higher the month after that. So on average, for those 2 months, 1 out of every 3 players would be playing a ranked playlist at any time, which is kind of crazy given Fortnite is often seen as a very casual game. But this is unsurprising because so many of those problems that Battle Royale has, Reload fixes. Reload's loot pool isn't exactly competitive, has a ton of mythics, exotics, rocket launchers, and shockwaves that break every build, but most of the time the insanely broken items that go into Battle Royale are not in Reload. TIE fighters, X-Wings, and a lot of the annoying overpowered vehicles that competitive players didn't enjoy in the Wrecked season are just not in Reload. And even though some of the stuff in the loot pool is overpowered, dying to it doesn't feel quite as bad. In Battle Royale, this kind of death would be 10 to 15 minutes of your life wasted, but in Reload, you just respawn 30 seconds later, so it kind of dampens the frustration of dying to something that's not that competitive. The respawn mechanic in Reload also naturally fixes the pacing issues that plague Ranked Battle Royale. You land at a drop spot, and even if you're uncontested, you can be fighting players within 30 seconds because of the quick looting, the smaller map, the mobility, and then that fighting will continue to basically the end of the game. It's constant action, which for practicing fighting means you're going to get way more fights per hour than if you just played Battle Royale. Reload also has reasonable matchmaking. Since games only have 40 players instead of the usual 100 that a Battle Royale game has, this means that it's easier to fill a lobby with players close to your rank. And this is especially useful on the smaller regions where filling a ranked Battle Royale match is close to impossible at times. But where ranked Reload fails is the exact same thing that Battle Royale fails at the most, which is actually the progression system. It's just the exact same as Battle Royale, so for all of the issues that exist there, they also exist in ranked Reload. So with ranked Battle Royale numbers at all-time lows, is Reload killing the playlist? Well, as I already mentioned, Ranked Battle Royale has a lot of problems already, which over time has pushed people away. However, it's still one of the only ways to practice with the actual competitive weapons, which often aren't in Reload or in UEFN maps, and it's still one of the only ways to practice somewhat realistic in-game fighting with what feels like tournament servers and performance. But The addition of the Reload Ranked playlist has definitely taken numbers away from Battle Royale. Since the release of Ranked, there's been an average of 23.2% of any player playing a Ranked playlist mode at a time. There are obvious ups for new chapters and OG seasons, and downs for Wrecked, but this is somewhat consistent. However, when you look at what Ranked playlist these players are playing, that's when things shift massively. Since the release of Ranked Reload, there have been only 2 months where there has been less than 60% of the Ranked population in Ranked Reload. This means that for out of every 5 players who are queuing into any Ranked playlist, 3 of them are queuing into Reload. This playlist may have initially converted some casual players to Ranked, which was clear by the large Ranked populations in the first 2 months of its release, but it would appear that over time, more Ranked players are just choosing to play Reload over Battle Royale. This isn't particularly surprising because both offer relatively the similar experience in terms of practice. You're just going to be fighting players, and you're not really trying to grind to win the match. But one playlist is just more engaging at this than the other.
As much as I love playing Reload, I really hope that Epic Games put a lot of effort into Ranked Battle Royale to make it a playlist that players are actually excited to play.